I'm Sarah Westwood, and I'm here today with Congressman Bob Good from Virginia to talk about the Senate's bipartisan gun deal. So thanks for being here, Congressman.
Great to be with you, Sarah.
Just this week, the Senate voted to move forward with this bipartisan gun deal. It has a lot of different components, and you called the 10 Republican senators who helped negotiate it the surrender caucus. So if you could sort of sum it up, what is, your objection to this bill?
Well, apparently the surrender caucus has grown to 15 members now, I'm told, that are supporting this on the Republican side. And it's very disappointing because this isn't really doing anything to address the real problems in our country as it relates to violent crime. We're not prosecuting criminals. We're undermining our police instead of supporting our police. We need to, again, support our police. We need to prosecute violent criminals. We need to end no cash bail. And frankly, we need to harden our schools. It's a perfect example. There's a reason why these shootings tend to take place when these criminals recognize that no one's going to be shooting back. They don't go into a police station or a Second Amendment rally to shoot up the place. They go where there's no one shooting back. And we need to harden our schools, something I advocated for when I was a county supervisor in Campbell County outside Lynchburg.
If we can sort of break down some of the parts of the bill, one of the most contentious has been this funding for red flag laws. In a lot of the shootings that we've seen, though, family and friends of the perpetrator have often, in the aftermath, come out and said, the warning signs were there. So why shouldn't there be a mechanism for people who observe potentially dangerous behavior to get guns out of their hands?
Well, the underlying premise, quite frankly, that law-abiding citizens' ability to exercise their Second Amendment rights to protect themselves is dependent on the actions of those who break the law. There are individuals who will, evil exists in our world, and that's why, frankly, we need our Second Amendment rights to protect ourselves. But those who know that it's already illegal to kill someone, to commit murder, of course, we have laws against that, and don't care about that, and are intent on doing harm, that my right to defend myself, my family's right to defend themselves, is contingent upon the actions of those who disobey the law, the criminals. That's what this basis is upon. And the Second Amendment right is absolute. The President said it's not absolute. It absolutely is absolute. And the founders intended that there would be no restrictions. Congress has no power in the Constitution to restrict the rights of citizens to protect themselves. So that is the underlying premise that's under assault. And appeasement never works. The Democrat Party is persuaded that what they ultimately want is registration and confiscation. They do not believe in the Second Amendment right. They would eliminate it if they could. They know they can't do it at the ballot box, frankly, so they want to do it through the court system. But these senators should not be working as the surrender caucus, I should say, with the Democrats to restrict American Second Amendment rights.
The Republicans haven't framed, this outbreak of these kinds of shootings like we saw in Uvalde and Buffalo as a gun control issue, but as a mental health issue. And red flag laws, in the arguments of those who support them, try to go after the mental health piece of that. So is there any kind of red flag law or emergency protective order, whatever you want to frame them as, that you think Republicans could get behind, or do you think that's totally off the table?
We don't talk about the 100 police officers that were killed last year in the line of duty. We don't talk about the hundreds that are shot every weekend in America's blue cities and the violence that happens across our country. We selectively pick a few incidents that fit the narrative of trying to advance their anti-gun agenda, anti-gun rights agenda, I should say, instead of dealing with the root causes. And as you know, in almost every situation where this happens, where a young person does something like what happened with Uvalde, there's a breakdown in the family, there's a breakdown in the home, there's not a father in the home, and there's root causes that reflect where we are going as a culture, undermining morality, undermining the family. But yes, and often, as you referenced a few moments ago, you'll see where those closest to the individual recognize things that they did not report, that they did not seek to get that person help. Often you'll say, oh yeah, I knew he was going to do something because the warning signs were there, the things that they were posting on social media, the things that they were telling us, the threats they were being made, and no one took those seriously.
You're right that the Uvalde shooter was young. He was 18, and so was the shooter in Buffalo. And one thing that was on the table when Senate negotiators first began was raising the minimum age for purchasing certain kinds of rifles from 18 to 21. That didn't get put into the bill. Do you think that's something that is worth considering for Republicans, given the age of the shooters that we've seen?
No, I don't think it's an age issue, that an 18, 19, 20-year-old adult, I don't think that's the problem. Again, it's the underlying issues of the individual. What causes that individual to do that, which we tend not to want to address. But if you're 18 years old and you can be drafted and you can serve in our military and you can defend our country and you can be a law enforcement officer, then you ought to be able to exercise your Second Amendment rights as well.
The other part of this bill that was pretty contentious was the so-called boyfriend loophole, which sort of prevents people who are accused of domestically abusing a dating partner from having a gun. Right now, federal law just prevents people who have abused a spouse from getting a gun. What's the objection to something that, on at least at face value, seems like such an obvious fix to the law?
Well, the fear, again, is the slippery slope. It's coming from the Democrats, coming from the left, who, again, believe in registration and confiscation. They do not believe in the right to keep and bear arms. They do not believe in the Second Amendment. They do not believe in the Constitution. So I'm suspicious with anything that comes from the other side on what their ultimate intent is. But to make it easier for folks to accuse folks without it being adjudicated, without having to go to, without the individual who's being accused to have the opportunity to go and to be heard, and they might not even know that they've been reported to that effect, and so I think that's a slippery slope that's dangerous. We ought to make it very clear to Americans that we do stand on the Constitution, we do stand on individual freedom, individual liberty, we stand behind law-abiding citizens to exercise their right to protect themselves, and we don't compromise that right because of those who do break the law. There's things that we can do to allow people to better protect themselves, there's things that we can do to make it, again, our schools safer, there's things we can do to better support our police, to better prosecute violent criminals. You know, we've got these DAs, these Soros-funded DAs and prosecutors, using that term loosely, who don't, you know, what we just saw recently happen in California with Gascon. They want to let out these violent offenders. Here in Virginia, the previous governor was allowing violent offenders to be released from prison so they didn't get COVID. That we need to do is get back to being law and order. The Republican Party is the party of law and order. This is an issue that it shouldn't be political. It's about what's right. The Constitution is paramount. Again, we are a nation based on laws. We're unique among the nations of the world in the way that we were founded on a constitutional republic. And so the Second Amendment and our Second Amendment, our Bill of Rights, our Constitution is paramount, and that we ought to stand on that.
Democrats, when they were talking about why there was opposition, or they expected more opposition in the Republican Party to this kind of legislation, they pointed, especially in the aftermath of Uvalde, to the so-called gun lobby, that they held so much sway over Republican members. They were going to try to, prevent gun reform from moving forward. You're a congressman. Do you have a lot of interactions with the gun lobby? Do you see it as a powerful force on Capitol Hill, or is there something else?
One of the dangers during a time of emotion is, this move, we have to do something. Well, we don't have to do something bad. We don't have to be in a rush to do something wrong. We shouldn't be in a hurry to do the wrong thing. And while it may make some members feel good that they passed something that's really not going to make a difference, quite frankly, this is not really going to make a difference on these. Tell me which of these crimes that we've seen, these violent crimes, these mass shootings, would have been prohibited by. It's not about gun violence. It's about individuals being violent, and we need to deal with crime and as opposed to. And the Democrat Party and their friends in the media, the present company accepted, of course, but wants to make this about these organizations that support our freedoms, that support individual liberties, that support our constitutional rights. And it's not about that. It's not about the organizations. They represent their members, and they represent citizens who believe in the Constitution and believe in our Bill of Rights and believe in our Second Amendment.
Is it hard in the emotional aftermath of something like Uvalde, and when you're being presented with polling numbers that suggest there's widespread support for, certain gun control measures, and when you're facing, this onslaught on social media, to do something about guns when emotions are running so high? Is it difficult to sort of resist that temptation, which seems to have driven at least a number of your Republican colleagues in the Senate to the table?
Well, we all mourn, senseless loss of life. We all mourn tragedies that take place, like what took place in Uvalde, and we all want to do what we can to try to prevent those. However, we can do the wrong. You can just look at this bill. Even they're spending billions of dollars throwing money at the problem. That's always what Democrats' solution to everything is: to spend more money. Frankly, try to make states beholden upon the federal government to give them money to do what the federal government wants them to do, which usually doesn't work out. Usually doesn't help the situation. But so you want to do what we can to prevent these tragedies, to be tough on crime, as I said, to bring consequences, to harden our schools, make our schools safer. I've advocated for years, going back to being county supervisor, that we ought to allow school personnel to be armed. Those who are trained and a desire to carry. The school that my wife and I sent our children to, we had a ready rapid response team, a security task force within the building that was ready to respond if something, God forbid, was to happen in the school. Well, those perpetrators who would like to take advantage on innocent victims, they're not going to go to the school where they know there's personnel inside who are going to defend that school. That's the kind of things that we ought to be working towards. And we ought to use some of this $1 billion that hasn't been spent in the name of the COVID to harden our schools across the country.
And finally, just broadly speaking, do you think this pretty dramatic split on something as fundamental to Republicans as, Second Amendment rights that we're seeing right now in the party portends any kind of, divisions or difficult legislative fights when, it's very likely that Republicans take control of both houses of Congress and maybe the White House in the next couple of years?
The reason that we're so competitive as a party is because we're right on the issues. When you think about how the Democrat Party controls all the levers of power, they control the White House, they control both houses of Congress, they control the media, they control big tech, they control the corporate boardrooms now, they control entertainment, they control academia, and yet we're competitive because we're right on the issues. And the American people are with us on the issues. The American people are going to give us control of Congress because they're going to reject what the Democrats have done and what the Democrats' policies are, because the Democrats have been exposed like never before on who they stand for. And we need to be bold and stand strong for the things that people elect us to do. And that includes being strong on the Constitution, that means being strong on the rule of law, and that means being strong on the Second Amendment as well.
Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Sarah.
You can get more reporting on this and all the other debates happening on Capitol Hill at washingtonexaminer.com.